Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
Today's episode contains graphic testimony that may be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. In a town the size of Marion, it was hard not to know Anna Jean Anderson. Jean was a longtime resident in the Virginia town of less than 7,000 people, located in the Blue Ridge portion of the Appalachian Mountains. Most people in the area would seemingly have crossed paths with Jean. She taught elementary school for 3 decades, undoubtedly teaching children and then those grown-up children's children. She led Sunday school. Even after retirement, she stayed busy. The 68-year-old volunteered at the local hospital. She reportedly didn't have a romantic love in her life. She had been divorced for years. Jean didn't date, those close to her said, but she was clearly active. She was often out on the golf course twice a week with her friends. She would bake peach cobbler to cheer up someone who was sick. Her neighbors knew her by name. Caring and kind, but also cautious and careful, Jean lived alone. In September 1996, her friends and family and neighbors quickly noticed the clues, the red flags that something was wrong with Jean. Her house stayed dark for longer than it should. She didn't remove her garbage can from the street like usual after collection day. She never showed up like she had promised to her previously made plans. One of those worried about Jean was her sister, Shirley. On Monday, Shirley and Jean had talked on the phone and had agreed to meet up on Wednesday morning to sort through items that had belonged to their mother. This was a different time period, 1996, when cell phones weren't readily available like today. Jean couldn't simply call her sister once she was on the road if unexpectedly the plan had changed. So when Jean didn't show up on Wednesday, at first, Shirley assumed Jean must have picked up an emergency volunteer shift at the hospital. But Shirley kept calling Jean that day, and well into the evening. Nobody answered the phone. By 9:30 p.m., the phone kept ringing and ringing. Shirley enlisted neighbors to check on Jean, just to make sure everything was okay.
I didn't become alarmed until after 9:30 that night. So I was ringing, just pushing redial and ringing over and over. With her number without getting an answer. But it was ringing. Then I decided to call an acquaintance down the street, Sarah Jennings. Jean and Sarah's mother-in-law were friends, so I thought maybe she could find out if anybody had seen her that day or what she had been up to.
They called you back?
When I called Sarah, like I said, it was after 9:30. She offered to go to the house to see if her car was there, if lights were on, anyone answered the door, so forth. And she called me back and told me that the house was dark, no one answered the door, and that the car did not look like it had been moved that night because it had dew on it. She also gave me the information that I asked her for the next door neighbors. I knew the first names, but not the last name. Danny and Cindy Newman. So I then called them.
Cindy Newman was Jean's next-door neighbor, who had known her for 15 years. She and her husband agreed to go over to Jean's house, too. A reverend who lived across the street joined them. They knocked on the front door of Jean's dark house.
I think it was Reverend Montego tried the door, and it just kind of flew open. So we went on in the kitchen.
It wasn't locked?
No, sir.
Okay.
And we went on in the kitchen, and it was dark. So we turned the light on, and then when we looked around, the first thing we saw was her purse in the floor, and her billfold was open, and it was laying open to where her driver's license was showing. And the kitchen just for some reason looked very cluttered around the sink and stuff, because she was always really neat, and it just looked a little cluttered. So then we started on through the house, and Reverend Monzingo and my husband and myself, and we were calling for her, and there was no answer. So I told them which bedroom was hers, and so we started back through the hall. And then when the purse and everything was there, we kind of just got this feeling, and so Reverend Monzingo said maybe we should call the police. So he picked up the phone in the hall, and it was dead.
They sensed that there was something really wrong at the house. They backtracked their steps and called the police. This is Jillian, and in partnership with Law and Crime, you are listening to Court Junkie, episode 185. The Marion Police Department was going through a shift change around 11 p.m. when the call came in. It was Patrol Officer Richard Clark, a 10-year veteran of the department, who responded to Jean's house. Jean's back door was unlocked, and Officer Clark let himself in. He saw Jean's pocketbook. He announced himself. "Police officer, is anyone home?" He asked this again and again, but no one answered. He went through the house, going from room to room, shining his flashlight.
Nothing in that room. The next room to the left, there was a partially open door, which was another bedroom. I opened it. There was some type of, I would refer to it as a blanket chest or maybe a hope chest type thing, twisted out at a catty corner angle as you open the door at the foot of the bed, and that's when I found the body of Miss Anderson.
Jean's body was lying in her bed.
Any sign of what?
No signs of life.
No movement?
No movement or anything.
What did you do then?
I immediately radioed, and we had 1033, that is emergency traffic. We had a DOA, possible foul play.
The medical examiner, Dr. James Patterson, arrived at the scene.
Well, I found Miss Anderson in her bedroom, in her bed, obviously dead, with a ligature of sorts around her neck.
Everyone who knew Jean described her as methodical and meticulous and careful. She always locked her doors. She kept a clean house where there was a place for everything and everything in its place.
Jean was a very particular person and very neat, organized, detailed housekeeper.
That was in sharp contrast to the photographs taken of Jean's house after the murder that were called into evidence later on. Cabinet doors open, an overturned clothes rack, a knocked-over lamp by a trash can that was on its head, her purse discarded and the contents scattered. "It doesn't look like I've ever seen it," Jean's sister told the jury as she reviewed the photographs of the mess that seemed strangely out of place in Jean's once well-kept home. Why would anyone kill Jean Anderson? Virginia State Police Special Agent Donald Lambert testified about investigators' mentality in trying to answer that question.
We started looking for something that was new in Miss Anderson's life, something that had changed. She pretty much lived for 68 years, I believe it was, and suddenly this has happened, so we naturally looked for a change or something new or different.
For the first time, the rural community of Marion set up a task force to solve the case. Law enforcement officers knocked on neighbors' doors and talked to every person they could find. They stopped cars for traffic checks and followed up on the nearly 80 leads that were pouring in. "We did a very thorough investigation," Special Agent Lambert testified. The Roanoke Times wrote in a story, quote, "Jean Anderson's death shook her small town to the core. So when law enforcement agencies banded together to solve the case, the community wasn't far behind. A rape slaying has a personal impact on a community, especially when the victim is your neighbor, the woman who taught you in 5th grade, your Sunday school teacher." The paper went on to say that the community's intense involvement with the case just may have helped solve it. That and the rapidly assembled police task force. Living alone, Jean Anderson had needed some help on her house, something for a fix-it person to do. The insulation was hanging down, and the weather was getting cold. Jean wanted it repaired right away. Teddy was a small business owner who would normally be working on Jean's house, but Teddy told her he wouldn't be able to make it over for a few days.
And what sort of thing did you do?
Well, she said she had someone previously working on the house, and they noticed that she had some insulation hanging down. And she was worried about it and wanted me to come over and see if I could fix it for her and take care of it.
Okay.
At that time, I have a disability. I have gout, and I was hurting and told her it might take a few days before I could drop by. And she said she was worried about it getting cold and wanted to know if I thought I could get to it before it got any colder. And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I think, sometimes it'll last a week or two, and sometimes it's just a few days." I said, "I think I can probably get to it later on."
Almost right at that moment, a young man walked into Teddy's, looking for a job.
And actually, at that point in time, a gentleman or a boy walked through the door, and he was looking for work. And
Was it Harold Davis?
Harold Davis, yes, sir.
Teddy decided to give Harold Davis some work. He sent him over to Jean's house. Jean was anxious to have her house in good shape with winter looming ahead, but she confided in one church friend that having workers at her house also made her nervous.
She remarked that she had some people working on her house.
Did she complain about it?
Yeah, she said she didn't feel comfortable when they were there, and that she tried to be gone as much as possible away from the house.
Did that sound like...
Well, I thought at the time, she thought maybe they weren't doing the quality of work she expected or something. I didn't realize anything else.
Right. Okay. Did she seem concerned about anything else besides that?
Well, she said that they were supposed to she had just had a crawl space. She did not have a basement. And she said they were supposed to put black plastic there, and that they were supposed to do some insulation and some pesticide work. But she said they trimmed her shrubs too, and she didn't even ask them to do that. And she didn't know, she was real concerned why they did that.
While they trimmed her shrubs?
Right.
Very meticulous person?
Very meticulous.
23-year-old Harold Davis had worked at Jean's house from Wednesday through Friday. With Jean deceased, police knew about the house repairs that had been underway, and it didn't take long before they zeroed in on Harold. They interviewed Harold, who named 17-year-old Josh Widener as his alibi. In the eyes of the investigators, Josh soon went from Harold's alibi to Harold's accomplice. Josh knew Jean. She had been his 5th grade teacher. The police investigation was moving swiftly.
After that, we asked Mr. Widener to come in for interview. He and his father came in voluntarily. At that time, he was a witness. We just want to know if he was Harold Davis's alibi.
But the alliance between Josh and Harold soon started crumbling. Harold decided he was going to turn on Josh and cooperate with authorities. He was going to tell them exactly what had happened. Harold Davis took the stand as a witness for the prosecution and testified against Josh Widener during Josh's murder trial. By then, Harold had taken a plea deal, avoiding trial, and was sentenced to 3 life terms in prison. Step by step, matter-of-factly, Harold testified about the murder. Here's how he said the night started. It was under a haze. Harold testified that they dabbled in a little bit of everything, including methamphetamine and prescription pills. Josh and Harold, 2 friends who had both been in trouble with the law before, talked about breaking into houses. Their words turned to action. Harold remembered Jean, whose home he had been repairing, and remembered that she had lived alone. They set out. Josh joked about raping Jean, Harold testified. Harold hoped that there was going to be money they could steal. He denied that their intent was to murder Jean. He said they only wanted to rob her. They reached Jean's house. The only weapon they had was Harold's knife. They didn't have a gun. They walked around the house and found an open kitchen window, their way in. Jean, dressed in a nightgown, had just gone to bed. Josh cut the phone lines. They then broke in through the window. Harold boosted Josh through it. Harold testified that he pulled his shirt over his head so Jean wouldn't recognize him as the worker who had been out in her house earlier, and that he deepened his voice as a disguise. The defense would question many aspects of Harold's version of events. They first questioned why he covered his face, and how could he see?
I had my shirt like this, pulled up over my face.
With it still around your neck and you just pull it up over your
Yes,
face? And well, how do you see?
It wasn't over my eyes. I had a
You had
hat
it
on.
high back?
No.
Well, tell me how you covered your face with your
I just pulled the
shirt.
shirt up. I had a tight shirt. I pulled the shirt up over my head. Like it was about right here.
And it was high enough just to stay up?
Yes, sir, it was.
Without you having to tie it or anything like that?
Yes, sir.
Well, were you concerned about being recognized?
Yes, sir.
Didn't want to be recognized?
Yes, sir.
Well, why go into Mrs. Anderson's house? A woman who knew you from having worked out there and you had at least 2 conversations with her. If you were concerned about being recognized, Mr. Davis, why bring into that house?
Because the woman was alone and we wanted to break in the house.
Didn't it bother you that maybe she'd recognize your voice since you had your face so covered?
I kind of changed my voice.
Well, show me how you changed your voice.
No, sir.
What do you mean, no, sir?
I won't do it.
Why not?
Because I don't want to.
You're not instructed. Ask the court to instruct the witness to answer my question.
Then show us how you changed your voice, Mr. Davis.
I just changed my voice. I made it deeper. That's all I done. Josh was doing the same thing.
Well, was Josh worried about his voice being recognized?
Not really.
Well, why would he go to the trouble of trying to change his voice?
Sir, I don't know.
Once Josh got inside, he opened the door and let Harold in.
The door was cracked. We walked down the hall. He opens the door, goes in, I'm right behind him. He grabs the woman and puts his hand over her mouth and wrestles her to the floor. She was a strong woman. She was wrestling with it. Wrestled her to the floor. I went through the house trying to find stuff, but I couldn't find nothing. There was like a little safe, like halfway in the hall. It had a lock on it. I couldn't find nothing. I took her, just took and went around the house and looked. I come back. He was holding her in the floor. I said, I asked her where her pocketbook was. And I asked her about the lock on the thing, but, I just kept asking her. She finally told me where it was. I went back down into the hall, to the end of the hall. Pocketbook. I don't know where they got it. It was in the living room, but it wasn't in the living room. It was on a chair right inside the kitchen. there's a table. As you go in the kitchen, it was sitting on a chair. I took it out of the chair. I put it in the hallway. And I went through it, and I didn't find nothing. So I left, and I went back in there. He told me I was going to have to hold her. So I held her while he went and searched the house. He come back, he was raising Cain about $5. Said he found $5 and was raising Cain. So I told him to hold her because I couldn't hold the woman. She was too strong.
Harold said he left the room again and searched around the house for things to steal, while in the other room, Josh raped Jean. Harold stopped to grab a drink of orange juice from the refrigerator. He said he was thirsty. Harold went back into the room. He thought about raping Jean too, but he said he wasn't physically able to do it. On the stand, Harold described the struggle as he and his friend tried to tie Jean up with the strips cut from bedsheets, and Jean fought for her life. In the process, Harold's gold earring fell off on the bedroom floor. It would catch investigators' eyes later and be collected as evidence.
I was trying to tie her up so we could get out of there. I didn't want the woman dead. I was just trying to tie her arms up and get out of there after he cut the sheets. He was holding her at the end of the bed like this right here. Just leaning down on her, holding her.
I cannot see what Judge is saying.
She was on her all fours, and he was holding her like this right here, down on top of her. Kind of like smothering her so he could hold her down. She kept screaming and hollering, and I got her legs tied up once, and her arms, I think. She kept breaking loose and screaming. I was just trying to scare the woman to get her to shut up. I told him the next time she screamed to shoot her. I just wanted to scare her, you know. I told Josh to shoot her. Just trying to get her to maybe she'd think that we had a gun. And that, but, you know, she kept doing it and she kept doing it. And I told him to kill her. I thought maybe that'll scare her enough to quit. But she was still jerking. And after I told him that, he looked up at me and he said, I think she's on her way.
He said he felt for her pulse afterwards, but couldn't find one. He tried her neck and arm. He said he knew she was dead, but he didn't want to believe it.
I can't remember which one it was, me or Josh, put a sheet over top of her. And I'd already went to the house and wiped it down once, but he went back to the house again. And I don't know if I took the one out and he put it back in or what, or fixed it. I don't know. I just know that he went back to the house and he wiped the house down again.
Harold faced many questions on the stand from both the prosecution and Josh's defense attorney. He went back and explained more details, like what happened as Jean fought back. He said she grabbed his testicles at one point and squeezed as hard as she could and wouldn't let go. Harold said he then hit her.
When was it that she grabbed you by your testicles? When did that happen?
When I first got down there. When I first undid my pants and I couldn't get nothing, she reached around and grabbed it.
And then she goes limp again? You pick her up under her stomach? And
this was after that.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. You attempted to rape her.
This is what happened. I done my pants. I couldn't do it. She reaches around and grabs me because I guess I had my hand on her hip. She reaches around and grabs me. I guess she thought she'd had enough. You know what I'm saying? I guess she thought she'd had enough. She grabbed me. She wouldn't let go of me. I hit her in the back of the head once or twice.
Did it render her unconscious?
No, sir, it didn't.
Oh, how do you know?
Because she screamed.
When you hit her?
Yes, sir.
Did she scream any more after that?
She would scream. She would try to, but she didn't. She just quit. It's like I hit her once, she screamed.
And then she just quit?
She was saying, oh, God. That's the only thing she was saying. She wasn't screaming. She was saying, oh, God.
Harold and Josh had been inside Jean's house for about an hour. It was time to go. Harold said he threw Jean's jewelry box in the bushes. He elaborated about why he didn't want to keep her jewelry.
Because I didn't want it. I didn't want nothing that woman had.
Had you opened it up?
No, sir.
You had it in your hand, and you threw it under the bush.
Yes, sir.
He said at that point, he didn't care about fingerprints. He just wanted to get as far away as possible. Josh's attorney pointed out that he is currently serving 3 life sentences and that he had pleaded guilty to murder.
And the reason you were serving those is because you confessed Mrs. Anderson's murder.
No, sir.
Why are you?
So I took a plea bargain.
Well, did you plead guilty to something?
Pled guilty to all of it.
Including her murder?
Didn't want the death penalty.
You pled and took a life sentence because you pled guilty to killing her.
No, sir.
Not just raping her, not just robbing her, not just breaking into her house, but snuffing out her life.
No, sir.
You did not. Tell this court you didn't plead guilty to that?
I didn't plead guilty because of that. I pled guilty because I didn't want the death penalty.
Did you think there was a good chance you were going to get it?
In Smith County, a small town? Yes, sir. They wanted somebody to pay for it.
And you're that person?
No, sir.
After they fled, Harold said he warned Josh to keep quiet, since Josh was the one who killed Jean. But Harold knew he himself was caught up in the crime too. We can't say nothing to nobody because we both would be doing hard time, Harold said. He just kind of ignored me. I mean, he didn't say nothing. They went back and forth with wild plots on how to hide the evidence. Could they burn Jean's house down? Should they go back and take Jean's body and throw her over a mountain to hide it? I was scared, Harold testified. In the end, they didn't do anything. They didn't return to the scene. Within 24 hours of Jean's body being found, Harold became a suspect. He said he wished he hadn't been involved with Josh.
The police kept coming to question me. And I wouldn't say nothing. They gave me a polygraph. I wouldn't say nothing. I was scared, you know. I just didn't want to be involved. And I was already involved. But if I had it to do all over again, I'd knocked him out that night, put him on my shoulder, come up and beat him in jail, so let me in. You know, but you couldn't do that. I was scared. They kept coming questioning. Then they come and arrested me on the 11th of September, 1996. So I was under arrest for capital murder. When they was questioning me that night, I was messed up. They kept telling me that Josh had gave a statement on me saying that I killed Miss Anderson. And I kept saying, well, let me see the part where he said that I killed the woman. You know, but they never would let me see his statement. It went on and on and on for like 4 or 5 hours. I'd been messed up all day. I finally broke down and gave them a statement, just thinking that I could change it later on, which I tried. I was in my jail cell a few days later, and I tried to talk to the law, you know. They never would talk to me.
Why are you here today? The prosecutor asked Harold. To tell the truth, Harold said. Are you getting anything out of it? He was asked. I ain't getting nothing out of it, he responded. Under questioning, the defense asked why Harold and Josh didn't rob any of the other houses or businesses they passed while on their long walk to Jean's. Jean's was the easiest one to break into, Harold testified, even though he was expecting a confrontation with the 68-year-old woman. She was alone, Harold said. You thought she was easy prey? Josh's attorney asked. Basically, Harold testified. Harold's testimony pointed the finger at Josh as the killer. But Harold conceded that he was no better than Josh.
And obviously you're repulsed about what happened. Is that right?
Repulsed about what happened?
Yes, sir. What happened to Mrs. Anderson?
Yes, I was.
You didn't know it?
No, sir, I didn't.
Tell anybody about it?
No, sir.
Talk to anybody about it?
No, sir.
And why not?
Because I didn't want to be nowhere involved in it.
Just wanted to walk away from it?
Yes, sir.
Your friend's a murderer. You think that Mrs. Anderson deserved to have that murder reported to someone?
I'm not saying that if he hadn't killed her, I would have killed her. But it could have been me. I don't think I'm any better than he is.
Well, what do you think could have been you? You could have been the person who killed her.
If he hadn't, I'm not saying I would have.
But you could have.
I could have been in his shoes. I don't think I'm any better than he is.
Throughout Josh's trial, other expert witnesses testified, including a fingerprint specialist who said Harold's fingerprints appeared on an orange juice container left out on the counter, and Josh's prints were captured on an exterior kitchen window screen. A forensic serologist whose expertise was analyzing DNA took vaginal swabs from Jean's body and ruled that the sperm found inside did not belong to Harold Davis. Here's an exchange between the defense attorney and Patricia Taylor from the State Crime Lab.
Can you say that Josh Widener was the contributor of this?
I cannot say that it was Josh Widener, no. However, the types that he possessed...
You cannot say that this was Josh Widener beyond reasonable scientific certainty.
The judge is trying to explain.
Let her answer, Mr. Clay.
The mixture is the sperm fraction. The sperm fraction of the vaginal swabs from Jane Anderson is consistent with the mixture. Based upon the individuals that I tested, Jean Anderson and Josh Widener cannot be eliminated as possible co-contributors of that mixture.
But like I said, you cannot say that Josh Widener was a contributor.
I cannot say that it is his, no.
Dr. David Oxley, a forensic pathologist and deputy chief medical examiner for Western Virginia, performed the autopsy on Jean.
She was clothed in a white nightgown which showed blood over the front portion of the gown and staining, which appeared to be urine staining of the front portion of the nightgown. There was what appeared to be a house coat or house dress type garment knotted around the neck. There was a ligature on the right wrist, which consisted of a pair of white fiber panties. There was a ligature on the left wrist, which appeared to be a portion of a torn sheet. This was tied around the wrist. The other end was not tied to anything.
Jean had ligature marks on her neck. The bruises were from strangulation. Her lungs were overinflated, another sign of strangulation. She also had vaginal tearing from violent trauma.
Dr. Oxley, were you able to determine to a reasonable degree of medical certainty what caused Ms. Anderson's death?
Yes, sir.
Could you tell the court, please, what that cause was?
Cause of death was strangulation.
He said she likely would have died within a few minutes. In his closing arguments, the prosecutor said that Harold was unhesitating in his testimony. He was unshaken, even when he faced a tough cross-examination. What Harold said was full of details and matched with the physical evidence. The prosecutor urged jurors to believe Harold's testimony. Harold had nothing to gain by taking the stand, he argued. Harold told the truth. It might be the most decent thing Harold Davis ever did, he said. During the defense's closing arguments, Josh's attorney said Harold was the one responsible for Jean's death. In the defense's version of events, when Jean grabbed Harold by the testicles, It ignited a murderous rage inside of him.
I think it tells the whole story. And that's this, that Mrs. Anderson, and perhaps the one act of justice, if there was any that happened this whole night, was able to muster the strength and to reach out toward her, attacker, and grab him by the testicles and squeeze in one last act of self-defense. That's what happened at that point. And what happened from there is not what Mr. Davis tells you, but what the common sense of this court will tell you is that he went into a rage at that point. It was no longer just torturing this poor woman. She had inflicted a plain and one act of self-defense against him, and that's the point where Mr. Davis just goes over the edge, and that's the point I suggest to this court that the murder happened.
He said after she grabbed him, Harold then grabbed Jean's nightgown and twisted the life out of her. In the prosecution's rebuttal, they pointed to the inconsistent statements Josh had given to the police. First, Josh had said Harold was the leader and was calling the shots. Then he said he stopped at the window and didn't go inside Jean's house. He also said Harold had raped Jean with a condom on, even though Josh's DNA was found inside of her. Josh, the prosecution said, is the cold-blooded murderer and rapist and burglar and robber of Jean Smith Anderson. And with that, the jurors were soon sent away to deliberate. When they came back with their verdict, guilty on all counts, the judge reminded the court of Josh's age. "You are a young man," he said, "barely 17 at the commission of these offenses." Then the judge addressed the courtroom, calling Jean's death one of the most horrible, violent, outrageous of crimes that he has ever heard. Then he spoke candidly about the case's impact on the small Virginia town, the emotions coming through in the judge's words.
No, we're not accustomed to this in Smith County, Virginia, Mr. Proctor. Fortunately, thank God. The picture that runs through one's mind on that evening of this healthy, spry lady, elderly lady, a friend, a neighbor, ex-school teacher, sister, volunteer, sitting in her home. We went to bed that evening on that quiet little street. The door was locked. We had neighbors nearby. In this tight-knit, peace-loving community.
He said Josh was as guilty, if not more guilty, than Harold on all charges.
Stand and face the court, Mr. Widener.
The judge called Harold and Josh pill-popping, pot-smoking, half-crazed criminals who invaded her home. "It's something we don't think about here," he said, "and it chills me to the bone." The judge then asked if Josh had anything he wished to say. "I'm sorry for the troubles I put the court through," Josh said.
I'll sentence you then, Mr. Widener. I do sentence you to serve a term of life in prison.
The judge sentenced Josh to life in prison. At the time, there seemed to be no doubt that Josh would spend the rest of his life in prison, just as the judge had ruled. But as the years passed, that certainty eroded for Jean's family members. Josh and his attorneys were fighting for a new sentencing hearing. Was there a chance Josh would ever be released? Reporter Jasmine Franks provided an update on Josh Widener and his criminal case in a December 2019 story published by SWVAtoday.com, a media outlet that covers community news in Southwest Virginia. By then, Josh was 41 years old and was incarcerated in Virginia's Pocahontas Correctional Center. In prison, he wrote a book, although he wasn't allowed to profit from his crimes, and said he had been trying to impress the older, cooler Harold at the time of the murder. All said and done, an innocent life was lost, and I was part of the reason, because I couldn't find the courage to say no and make my own choices, and because I allowed another man to influence my decisions, Josh wrote. I made the worst mistake a man could ever make, and I was the cause of someone losing their life. Now Josh is fighting his life sentence as the courts are re-examining how juveniles who committed violent crimes are sentenced. Josh is reportedly closely following one high-profile case, Lee Boyd Melvo, who was 17, the same age as Josh was when Josh murdered Jean, when Lee was the juvenile half of the D.C. snipers. Josh hopes the outcome of Lee Melvo's case could help him get his own freedom, thanks to a new Virginia law. In 2020, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam signed a new law that said prisoners serving life sentences for crimes committed as juveniles were eligible for parole after 20 years of incarceration. We spoke with a law professor who is a former juvenile probation officer to learn more.
My name is P.J. Verrecchia. I'm a professor of criminology and criminal justice at York College of Pennsylvania. The Supreme Court in 2005 said that, started recognizing that juveniles are qualitatively different than adults. In 2005, the Supreme Court said the death penalty for juveniles is cruel and unusual punishment. And then in subsequent cases, they started to have other rulings. And then another ruling said that life without parole is not an appropriate sentence for juveniles either. Again, with recognizing that juveniles are different than adults. And based upon that, states like Virginia and other states have abolished life without parole for anyone who committed an offense when they were deemed a juvenile. I say deemed a juvenile just because it is different from state to state, but in Virginia, is anyone under the age of 18. So if you were under the age of 18 in Virginia and you committed, say, a homicide, you cannot be sentenced to life without parole.
But Professor Verrecchia said that just because someone who committed a violent crime as a minor is eligible for parole, that doesn't mean they will be granted their freedom. Since around 2013 or 2014, Virginia's parole board has denied about 95% of parole applications.
Now, here's the thing. They're eligible for parole. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get parole. And that might be the one thing I think. A lot of people who saw this as a victory for criminal justice reform and social justice do have to recognize that not everybody who applies for a hearing is going to get a hearing. Not everyone who gets one is necessarily going to get parole, but they do see it as a step in the right direction, going against what they would call, let's say, excessive sentencing.
Jean's nephew, Scott Campbell, has spoken out against Virginia's new law and has advocated for Josh to not be released on parole. He spoke to the Richmond Times-Dispatch in 2020 and reportedly asked, how could someone who committed such a violent and heartless crime ever change? Scott reportedly felt betrayed that Josh's original sentence could be modified. It was my understanding that it was the judge's intention that he'd leave jail in a pine box, Scott told the newspaper. This is my government, this is my state, and that's what the judge said. If you can't rely on that, what can you rely on?
I think in this case, the judge basically said, this person will not see the light of day. And I think for the victim's family, there's a certain comfort in that. And now they're being told, well, this person might see the light of day, which is why I think it's kind of like, hurting them all over again. When people talk about criminal justice reform and social justice, we always have to remember there is a victim involved here. And in this case, there's a victim's family. And I know that in Virginia, this one senator, like I said, for 10 years, has been trying to get this legislation through. But you have victims and victim advocates who are at the same time pushing back against this legislation. So I think we always have to keep in mind that with a horrific crime comes a victim.
We asked Professor Verrecchia, how do you balance social justice reform and fair, non-excessive sentences for juveniles with the victims and their families?
Well, I'm going to admit my bias here right now. I was a juvenile probation officer for about 5 years. 7 years I worked in state administration in Pennsylvania's juvenile justice system. I give you that qualifier because I'd like to see these decisions in the hands of the professionals. You have the state lawmakers who are kind of, I think, removed from the day-to-day work. And I think that, so, for example, when it comes to incorrigibility or amenability to treatment, we would have professionals, say the probation officer, a psychologist or psychiatrist making this decision, as opposed to maybe the state legislature trying to have a blanket one-size-fits-all. Because that's a difficult thing. I think I read there was one case involving a juvenile life without parole. Someone was 18 at the time of or 17 at the time of their offense, and they were 68 still in prison. That seems wrong, but again, you have a victim's family there, and you've raised a good point. You look at the case, and some of these things are incredibly horrific, and I don't think the horror goes away after 10, 20, 30 years. So I guess to answer your question, I think that the decisions, I'd like to see the decisions in the hands of the professionals doing the day-to-day work.
In a phone interview from prison, Josh told reporter Jasmine Franks, "A man can't help but wish for a second chance after making a mistake and coming into a place like this at such a young age and never really getting to experience life. I definitely will always be hopeful for that." As of this recording, nothing has yet changed in Josh's case. And that's all for this episode. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. Let me know by joining the conversation on Instagram at Court Junkie, by tweeting me at Court Junkie Pod, or by emailing me at podcast@courtjunkie.com. This episode was researched and written by Gabrielle Russon. And a special thank you to Professor PJ Verrecchia for talking to us about this case. This case was a listener request. And if you have a case you'd like for me to look into, just shoot me an email at podcast@courtjunkie.com and put listener request in the subject line. I can then add your case to my research list and see if we can get enough info and if it would make for a good episode. Remember, this is Court Junkie, so the one stipulation is that the case has to have gone through or is currently going through the court system in some way. I don't cover unsolved cases. There are tons of other amazing true crime podcasts that do, though. Anyway, also a reminder that if you'd like to hear these episodes without the ads, or you want to check out additional Court Junkie bonus episodes, go to courtjunkie.com/support, and that will redirect you to my Patreon page. I'm working on a bonus episode right now that involves cases in which judges are the 13th juror. So to check that out, head on over to courtjunkie.com/support. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.